everywhere he goes, he meets folks that have seen the demonstration of God's power in the life of the individuals from the church at Thessalonica. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't imagine as a preacher of the gospel what would cause there to be greater thrill in your heart than to have preached the gospel in power of God. By the way, now it wouldn't be something that would elevate and lift up the Apostle Paul. It would be something that would be amazing about the gospel, the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul had preached the gospel to the church at Thessalonica, and now as he is going around the world preaching the gospel, he meets people that have become believers in Jesus Christ as a result of the testimony of the people in Thessalonica. In other words, they've preached the gospel the same way he did, and he goes and preaches the gospel, and folks have already heard and are already saved. And he said, so that we need not speak anything, in verse 8. Friend, that is the fulfillment of the Great Commission. Friend, if you preach the gospel in such a way that every person you meet, you say, well, I'd like to share with you the good news about how to go to heaven. They say, well, you could share it with me, but I'm saved and on my way to heaven because I got saved. Well, how did you hear about the gospel? I've never been here before. I've never preached that message here before. Well, the church over in Thessalonica shared it with me. Apostle Paul says, okay, I got to find a new candidate. He walks up to somebody else and says, let me share with you how you can know for sure that you're on your way to heaven. The person said, well, you can share with me, but I'm on my way to heaven because Jesus Christ died for my sins according to the Scriptures. He was buried and he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures. And I've trusted in the completed work on the cross, the atoning blood of Christ for my sins. And God saved me because I asked Him to. And so you could share it with me, but I'm already going to heaven. Is that how you're going to heaven? Well, yes, it is, actually. I'm glad to hear you're going to heaven. And go on and talk to somebody else, and you just go down the line, and everybody's heard the gospel. Paul can't go somewhere and preach the gospel to somebody that hasn't heard it. Now, there's some encouraging things about that. First of all, he probably felt like he was out of a job in some areas. And so, of course, I'm sure that he found different folks to preach the gospel for. Wouldn't you be glad, though, if the person that you tried to witness to, the reason that you couldn't witness to them was because they're already saved? Wouldn't that be a great problem to have? Friend, that's not the problem, and so let's preach the gospel in its full power. We've got all kind of candidates, all kind of options. But that ought to be our goal as Christians, you know it? Our hope in sharing the gospel ought to be that the whole world will be saved. How many of you, when you share the gospel, think the person you share it with is going to get saved? Why do you share the gospel if you don't think somebody's going to get saved? See, you got to share. You got to hear this. When you hear how to go to heaven, you're going to believe in Jesus. This is the power of God to salvation. See, the gospel has the effect of saving and changing lives. This is just thrilling to me. Well, the Apostle Paul talked about the power of the gospel in chapter 1, reminded the church at Thessalonica of it. And now he's going to share with them. See, the sense of this letter is a little different than the letter to the church at Corinth. The letters, which would have been correcting some doctrine and trying to encourage them to do right in some matters or helping to educate them, you get a sense in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians of it's us, fellow preachers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. You get this sense of these people are one with Him. And so he begins to share with them some things about ministry. And it's already assumed that these individuals are not merely interested in being partakers of the gospel, but they're interested in serving the Lord. So this is kind of a letter to a special group of people. These folks are servants, and the Apostle Paul is their servant, but they have begun to reproduce. And so this is almost what you would get if you went to a seminar for church workers, where this is how you pour yourself in the heart and life of people. And so here's some interesting things that we're going to look at this evening. I don't think it'll take very long. And so if you're beginning to go to sleep, go ahead and wake up for a few minutes before you know it. We'll be done, and I think you'll be helped by it. So here we are in verse 1. The Apostle Paul, first of all, it encourages the believers about this matter of not quitting, and he does so by using himself as an illustration or example. He said, for yourselves, brethren, know our entrance in unto you, that it was not in vain. Okay, now what is he talking about? Well, he said, when we came and preached the gospel to you at Thessalonica, we didn't waste our time. He said it wasn't in vain. By the way, let me encourage you, Christian, when you serve the Lord, you never do so in vain. If you live for the Lord based upon the immediate rewards of it, can I say to you that you'll probably quit pretty soon? But if you go for the long haul and you just dedicate your life to serve the Lord, it's not these bursts, not drink an energy drink and serve the Lord today and then be on the downside of it tomorrow and don't feel like it. But you go in for the long haul. Say, I'm going to live for the Lord the rest of my life, and I'm going to serve Him the rest of my life. What you'll find is that you don't see spiritual growth in a person on a day-to-day basis normally. You don't usually see somebody growing. But if you look back over a year or so, or a couple of years in time, you'll find, wow, there was ups and downs, but this person has really come along, grown in the Lord. And the Apostle Paul said, when we ministered to you, we didn't waste our time. Our entrance into you was not a waste of time. And he goes on to illustrate the difference between the reception for the gospel at Thessalonica versus when he preached to the Philippians. Okay, he said, but even after that we had suffered before and were shamefully entreated, as ye know at Philippi. Now he's referring to the time that happened when he was placed in stocks in public and shamed for preaching the gospel. That was the response to his preaching at Philippi. Now we know that there is a letter to the Philippians that's inspired as Scripture, and so the gospel was received at Philippi, but it was tough there. And here the Apostle Paul is encouraging these individuals not to quit just because things get tough. He says to these individuals at Thessalonica, he said, when we went to Philippi, we were put in stocks. What did he do after he left Philippi? He went and preached the gospel at Thessalonica. And friend, I want to say to you, it's not always easy to serve the Lord. There's nowhere in the Bible that teaches that when you go to serve the Lord, then everything's going to be easy. God guarantees His grace. He guarantees His power. You'll always be able to do right. There's not a time when you have to fail as a Christian. God guarantees that you can serve Him and you can live for Him and you can do right. But friend, He doesn't say it'll be easy. And the Apostle Paul is talking about what happened before things got good. And that is that things were bad. They were shamefully entreated at Philippi, and their response was to go and preach the gospel somewhere else. And friend, I want to encourage you with this truth, and I found it to be true in my life. It's in the Scripture, and so it's a fact. And that is, when you are having a hard time, that's just because something good's about to happen. Now, I'm not preaching some kind of motivational preaching or speaking, but I'm just telling you, times aren't always good, and if you're in a bad time, then that's just an indication that things are going to get better. The great thing about things being bad is there's a certain point in which things can't get worse, or so they say, right? When things are terrible, the great thing about it is that everything's uphill from there. Everything has got to be better because it's just about as bad as it can get. And Fred, I'm not saying that in sarcasm this evening. I'm not saying that this evening it just being flippant or even, I don't know how you'd say it, but anyway, I'm not saying it to discourage you tonight. I'm saying that to help you understand that things just get better for servants of the Lord. And here they were put in stocks. They were shamefully entreated at Philippi, and they went to Thessalonica, and those people got saved, and they had their lives changed, and they began to live and preach the same gospel to others, and the whole world heard the gospel as a result of it. And friend, at Philippi it didn't seem like it was going to go that way. When they left Philippi and they went to Thessalonica, they had just had some bad experiences. And I'll be honest with you, they had no promise of a good experience in Thessalonica. They didn't have a promise, well, okay, this is the bad experience, but since that's the bad one, now's the good one. Friends, serve the Lord. See, the Apostle Paul didn't go to Thessalonica because he said, well, I'm going to be a success there, and people are going to receive me, and they're going to treat me well, and they're going to become followers of us, and we're going to receive the honor that we deserve. Well, he went to Thessalonica to preach the gospel. He wasn't concerned about how he was received. Friend, I want to say to you, one mark of spiritual maturity, one mark of spiritual growth in your life is when it doesn't really matter how you're received or how you're entreated. It doesn't really matter because you're not serving those people, you're serving the King of Kings. And if somebody wrongs you, or somebody does something against you, or somebody does something damaging to you, keep in mind it's not always that way. Well, Christian, you've got to be careful with this matter of being wronged, about getting bitter and just thinking that all Christians are this way. And all they're not. I want to tell you something. I've been treated very well in life. Not everybody's treated me right. Not everybody's always been respectful. I probably haven't always done right myself. But friend, I have to say to you that there's no better people in the world than God's people. And I've never been treated better by anyone than the people that love the Lord. And so it's a wonderful thing to be a Christian. It's a wonderful thing to serve God. And the Apostle Paul is talking about the contrast between how he's received at Philippi, and these are the good times. By the way, most of Christianity is good times. Most of your Christian living is good times. It really is. Boy, you just look at the life of a believer who honors, loves, and serves the Lord, and I'm telling you, it's good times. My life's good times. You know, I would not trade life, and I mean just position, whatever, with anybody in the world. I've got the best life I could possibly have, and that's a fact. I'm telling you, my life's a dream. That's true. You know me. You know that I believe that with all my heart. Really, it really is. There's not a church in the world I'd rather be the pastor of than Fort Lauderdale Baptist Church. this is it for me. I mean, I've arrived, and I don't mean like I'm somebody or I'm something, but I mean I've got the good life.